In the vast darkness between stars, civilizations rise and fall like waves against cosmic shores. For millennia, the Galactic Defense Coalition maintained peace through diplomacy, trade agreements, and carefully orchestrated military campaigns fought by honorable warriors who followed ancient codes of conduct. When threats emerged, they sent soldiers, disciplined, predictable, bound by rules of engagement that even their enemies understood. But when the Devourers came from the void beyond known space, consuming entire worlds and leaving nothing but empty husks floating in the darkness, the Coalition's traditional warriors failed. Their honor codes became weaknesses, their predictable tactics became death sentences. Their mercy became extinction. In desperation, they turned to a young species from a small blue world, a species that had never learned the galaxy's rules because they had spent their entire evolutionary history learning how to kill each other with increasing efficiency. The Coalition asked for soldiers to join their noble cause. Humanity sent hunters instead. And the galaxy would never be the same again. Ambassador Kethvar of the Zephyrian High Council stood at the observation deck of the Coalition flagship Harmony's Edge, watching the primitive human vessel approach through the void. The ship looked nothing like proper Coalition vessels with their elegant curves and gleaming surfaces. This human craft appeared to be cobbled together from metal plates and angular protrusions, scarred by countless battles and repairs. It moved with purpose rather than grace, cutting through space like a predator stalking prey. "They call that a diplomatic vessel?" asked Commander Rilox, his forearms folding in what his species considered a gesture of disdain. The Manthari had been part of the Coalition for over 3,000 years and took pride in their military traditions. "According to their transmission, yes," Kethvar replied, his elongated fingers drumming nervously against the reinforced glass. "Though I suspect their definition of diplomacy differs significantly from ours. The humans had been discovered only 50 years ago, a species still confined to their single star system, but already showing signs of remarkable technological adaptation." What truly caught the Coalition's attention, however, were the detailed scans of their homeworld. Every continent bore scars of warfare. Their entire recorded history was one long chronicle of conflict, innovation born from necessity, and survival against impossible odds. When the Devourer crisis began 3 years ago, consuming the Outer Rim worlds faster than Coalition forces could respond, some members had suggested consulting these humans. Others had dismissed the idea as madness. How could a species that had never left their own solar system help against an enemy that had already destroyed civilizations spanning millennia? But desperation had a way of making the impossible seem reasonable. The human ship docked with mechanical precision that surprised Kethvar. Despite its crude appearance, the vessel's crew clearly understood proper docking procedures. The airlock cycled through its safety protocols, and soon the delegation would meet face to face. "Remember," Kethvar addressed the assembled Coalition representatives, "we approach this as equals seeking assistance, not as superior beings offering charity. Their technological limitations do not reflect their tactical capabilities." The airlock opened with a soft hiss. 3 humans stepped through, and immediately Kethvar understood why his military advisors had recommended this meeting. These were not the soft diplomatic corps members typical of Coalition species. The lead human was a female with short-cropped hair the color of autumn leaves, and eyes like chips of ice. Scars marked her visible skin, telling stories of survived conflicts. Her companions flanked her with the practiced ease of warriors who had fought together many times. "Ambassador Kethvar," she said, her voice carrying an accent that made the translated words sound sharper than intended. "I am General Sarah Chen of the Terran Defense Corps. These are Colonel Marcus Webb and Colonel Elena Vasquez." The humans did not bow, did not offer traditional Coalition gestures of respect, did not seem impressed by the assembled dignitaries representing dozens of worlds. They simply stood there with the confidence of apex predators comfortable in their own skin. "General Chen," Kethvar replied, offering the traditional Zephyrian greeting gesture. "Thank you for accepting our invitation. I confess we are uncertain of proper human diplomatic protocols." "We don't have many," Chen said with what might have been amusement. "We're more interested in results than ceremony. Your message mentioned an enemy that conventional tactics haven't stopped. We'd like to know more." Commander Rylock stepped forward, his forearms spreading in a gesture of authority. "General, with respect, your species has no experience with interstellar warfare. The Devourers have consumed 47 worlds in 3 years. They possess technology beyond your current understanding." Chen turned those ice chip eyes on Rylox, and the Manthari commander took an involuntary step backward. There was something predatory in her gaze, something that recognized challenge, and automatically began calculating ways to overcome it. "Commander," she said quietly, "my species has been at war for its entire recorded history. We fought with sticks and stones, gunpowder and nuclear weapons, computer viruses and orbital platforms. We've developed more ways to kill each other than most species develop ways to communicate. The technology might be different, but war is war. And from what your briefing material suggested, you're not fighting a war, you're fighting a slaughter." The assembled coalition representatives shifted uncomfortably. Chen's words cut too close to recent painful truths. "Perhaps," Kethvar interjected diplomatically, "we should adjourn to the briefing chamber where we can share more detailed information." The briefing chamber was a marvel of coalition engineering, with holographic displays capable of rendering entire star systems in perfect detail. As the lights dimmed and the first tactical displays appeared, showing the Devourer advance through coalition space, Chen and her colleagues studied the data with the intensity of predators examining prey. The Devourers, as coalition xenologists had named them, appeared to be a hive mind species of uncertain origin. They arrived in massive bioships that looked more grown than built, consuming everything organic on a planet's surface before moving on. Their technology seemed partially biological, making conventional electronic warfare ineffective. They showed no interest in communication, negotiation, or anything other than consumption. Standard coalition response has been to evacuate civilian populations and engage their bioships with our fleet units, explained Admiral Torvin, an elderly Kytherian whose species had served as the coalition's primary military force for generations. "However, they adapt to our tactics with disturbing speed. Each engagement teaches them how to counter our next move." Webb leaned forward, studying the tactical displays. "What about asymmetric warfare, hit-and-run tactics? Psychological operations?" "Psychological operations are ineffective against a hive mind," Admiral Torvin replied, with the patience of someone explaining obvious concepts to children. "And hit-and-run tactics violate the galactic rules of engagement." "We are not barbarians, Colonel." The silence that followed was profound. Chen exchanged glances with her colleagues, and Kethvar saw something pass between them that made his primary stomach clench with unease. "Admiral," Chen said slowly, "I think there's been a misunderstanding. Your message asked for military assistance against an existential threat. You mentioned that conventional approaches had failed and you needed new perspectives, but you're not looking for new tactics. You're looking for more efficient ways to implement the same failed strategies. The rules of engagement exist for good reasons," Commander Rylox interjected. "They separate civilized species from savage ones. They ensure that conflicts remain limited and proportional." "How that working out for you?" Colonel Vasquez asked, speaking for the first time. Her voice carried the flat affect of someone who had seen too much death to be impressed by theoretical morality. 47 dead worlds, was it? The coalition representatives bristled, but Chen raised a hand to forestall any heated responses. "Let me ask a simple question," she continued. "Do these Devourers follow your rules of engagement? Do they limit their attacks to military targets? Do they offer surrender terms? Do they provide medical aid to wounded enemies? Well, no, but then you're fighting by rules your enemy doesn't acknowledge while they systematically exterminate your people. That's not war, Admiral. That's assisted suicide." Admiral Torvin's crest flared with indignation. "General Chen, the Coalition has maintained peace for over 5,000 years through adherence to civilized principles of warfare. We will not abandon our moral foundations simply because we face a difficult enemy." Chen stood slowly, and something about the movement made every Coalition officer in the room tense. She was not a large woman by human standards, but her presence seemed to fill the space around her. "Admiral, let me be absolutely clear about what we're offering, because I don't think you understand. Humans don't fight wars to follow rules. We fight wars to win them. We fight wars to survive them. We fight wars to make sure our enemies never threaten us again. If you want soldiers who will fight bravely and lose nobly while following your rules, you called the wrong species." She gestured to the tactical displays showing the Devourer advance. "But if you want someone to stop that threat, if you want someone to make those creatures regret the day they decided to consume Coalition worlds, if you want hunters who will track them to whatever dark corner of space they crawled out of and make sure they never threaten anyone again, then you called exactly the right species." The chamber fell silent except for the soft hum of the ship's life support systems. Kethvar found himself studying the three humans with new eyes. They were not here as supplicants seeking glory or honor. They were here as professionals offering a service, and the nature of that service was becoming increasingly clear. "What exactly are you proposing?" he asked quietly. Chen smiled, and for the first time since entering the briefing chamber, she looked genuinely pleased. It was not a reassuring expression. "We're proposing to hunt them down and kill them all," she said simply. "Every last one. We're going to find out where they come from, what they want, and how they think. And then we're going to use that knowledge to exterminate them so completely that their entire species becomes a cautionary tale told around campfires by whatever emerges from the ashes of their civilization." Colonel Webb pulled up additional data displays with practiced efficiency. "We've already identified 17 major tactical errors in your previous engagements. Your fleet formations are designed for ceremonial purposes rather than combat effectiveness. Your weapons targeting systems prioritize minimizing collateral damage over maximizing enemy casualties. Your communication protocols are so standardized that even we could predict your tactical responses after studying 3 battle recordings. You fight like you're trying to arrest criminals rather than exterminate existential threats," Vasquez added. "That works when your enemies share your moral framework. These devourers don't even recognize the concept of morality. They're a cancer, and you don't negotiate with cancer. You cut it out." Admiral Torvin looked physically ill. "You're talking about genocide." "No," Chen corrected. "We're talking about pest control. Genocide implies the extinction of a sentient species with rights and dignity. From everything you've shown us, these devourers are biological machines programmed to consume and reproduce. They show no evidence of culture, art, philosophy, or individual consciousness. They're not a civilization, they're an infestation." She activated her own portable display system showing detailed analyses that made the Coalition's tactical reports look like children's drawings.
"However, before we proceed, we need absolute clarity on our rules of engagement."
"Not your rules, ours. When we hunt something, we hunt it to extinction. We don't take prisoners unless they have intelligence value. We don't show mercy unless it serves a tactical purpose. We don't fight fair, and we don't give our enemies opportunities to adapt to our methods." The general paused, studying each coalition representative in turn. "If you want us to hold back, to fight with one hand tied behind our backs while your people die, then we'll politely decline this invitation and return to Earth. But if you want the Devourer threat ended permanently, if you want your children to grow up in a galaxy where this particular nightmare never returns, then you need to understand that there's only one way that happens. Which is?" Kethvar asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. "We kill them all," Chen said with the matter-of-fact tone of someone discussing weather patterns. "We kill them fast, we kill them efficiently, and we make sure we don't miss any. And when we're done, we salt the Earth so thoroughly that nothing like them can ever grow there again." The Coalition representatives exchanged uncertain glances. They had called for help, but this was something far beyond their expectations. These humans weren't offering to join their noble crusade. They were offering to take over the war entirely, and wage it by rules that made the Coalition's military traditions seem like elaborate games. But beyond the observation windows, the void held 47 empty worlds where billions of Coalition citizens had once lived, worked, and dreamed of the future. And somewhere in that same void, the Devourers continued their inexorable advance toward the core worlds, adapting to every tactic the Coalition threw at them. Perhaps it was time to stop playing games and start playing to win. "What would you need?" Kethvar asked quietly. Chen smiled again, and this time there was nothing pleasant about the expression at all. "Everything," she said. "Complete tactical authority. Access to all Coalition intelligence assets. Permission to modify your military hardware to proper combat specifications. And most importantly, permission to wage this war the way wars are actually won." She gestured toward the tactical displays one final time.
"You called for soldiers."
"But soldiers fight battles. You don't need someone to fight battles with these creatures. You need someone to end their entire existence as a threat to organized life. And that, Admiral, is what hunters do." The transformation of Coalition military doctrine began within hours of the agreement being signed. General Chen had not exaggerated when she said humans would need everything. The first shock came when human engineering teams arrived aboard massive cargo vessels that dwarfed even Coalition dreadnoughts, their holds packed with equipment that looked more like industrial machinery than military hardware. Captain Zentai of the Coalition cruiser Righteous Purpose watched in bewilderment as human technicians swarmed over his ship's weapon systems, tearing out components that had served faithfully for decades and replacing them with devices that hummed with barely contained energy. "General Chen," he addressed the human commander as she supervised the modifications personally, "I must protest these changes. My ship's targeting systems have been calibrated for precision strikes against military targets. These new weapons appear designed for area denial and maximum destructive capability." Chen didn't look up from the display showing power routing modifications. "Your old targeting systems were designed to disable enemy vessels while minimizing casualties. These new ones are designed to ensure that when we shoot something, it stops existing as a threat forever. But the power requirements alone have been compensated for by removing non-essential systems like recreational facilities, diplomatic chambers, and medical bays designed for treating enemy wounded." Chen finally turned to face him, her expression matter-of-fact. "Captain, you're no longer operating a peacekeeping vessel. You're operating a hunter-killer designed to track down and eliminate an existential threat. Every cubic meter of space not devoted to that mission is wasted space." Similar modifications were taking place across the Coalition fleet, and the results were disturbing to officers trained in traditional warfare. Human engineers stripped away everything they considered superfluous luxury, replacing it with additional weapons, enhanced sensors, and what they termed adaptive countermeasures. The elegant curves of Coalition ship design gave way to angular efficiency, with weapon ports positioned for maximum overlapping fields of fire rather than aesthetic appeal. Admiral Torvin found the changes so distressing that he requested a personal meeting with Ambassador Kethvar to discuss his concerns. "They're turning our ships into instruments of slaughter," he complained, as they walked through the modified engineering sections of the flagship. "Look at this weapon system. It's designed to fire continuously until the target is completely destroyed, with no provisions for accepting surrender or offering quarter." "And is that necessarily a bad thing when fighting Devourers?" Kethvar asked quietly. "It sets a precedent. What happens after we defeat this threat? Do we revert to civilized warfare, or do we continue using these human methods against other species?" Before Kethvar could respond, alarms began sounding throughout the ship. Emergency lights bathed the corridors in red illumination as they rushed to the command center, where they found General Chen studying incoming reports with the focused intensity of a predator that had caught a familiar scent. "Devourer bioships have entered the Kelleran system," reported Lieutenant Commander Vexlin, her tentacles rippling with nervous energy. "Conventional protocols call for immediate evacuation of civilian populations while our fleet moves to intercept." "Belay those orders," Chen said without looking up from her displays. "General," Admiral Torvin interjected. "The Kelleran system houses over 3 billion civilians. Standard doctrine requires." "Standard doctrine is why you've lost 47 worlds." Chen interrupted, finally turning to face the assembled Coalition officers. "We're not evacuating Kelleran. We're using it as bait." The command center fell silent except for the background hum of electronic systems. Several Coalition officers looked physically ill at the suggestion. "You cannot be serious," Admiral Torvin said, his crest flaring with indignation. "We will not sacrifice civilian lives for tactical advantage." "We're not sacrificing them," Chen explained with the patience of someone teaching basic concepts to children. "We're protecting them by ensuring the Devourers never get the chance to consume them. But first, we need to understand exactly how these creatures operate under optimal conditions." She activated her personal display system, showing detailed tactical projections that made the Coalition's strategic planning look primitive by comparison. "Every previous engagement with Devourers has been reactive. You wait until they attack, then respond according to predetermined protocols they've already learned to counter. We're going to do something they've never experienced before. We're going to attack them first, in the location of our choosing, using methods they won't expect." Colonel Webb stepped forward, manipulating the tactical displays with practiced efficiency. Intelligence reports indicate Devourers typically spend between 6 and 12 hours establishing feeding patterns when they encounter a populated world. During that period, they're vulnerable to coordinated strikes against their bioship support structures. "You want to attack them while they're feeding?" Admiral Torvin asked, horrified. "While they're consuming civilian populations? We want to attack them before they start feeding," Colonel Vasquez corrected. "The moment their bioships enter the system, before they can establish orbital patterns or deploy surface collection units." Chen pulled up additional data showing modified fleet formations that bore no resemblance to traditional Coalition tactics. Instead of the ceremonial battle lines preferred by Coalition forces, human strategic doctrine called for dispersed hunter-killer groups operating independently but in coordination. Traditional Coalition response puts your entire fleet in one location, making it easy for Devourers to adapt their tactics to counter a single approach. We're going to hit them simultaneously from 17 different vectors, each group using completely different weapon systems and tactical approaches. She highlighted specific fleet elements on the display. Group Alpha uses modified kinetic impactors to target their bioship propulsion systems. Group Beta deploys electromagnetic pulse weapons to disrupt their organic technology. Group Gamma uses thermal weaponry designed to cauterize their regenerative capabilities. And if some of these approaches fail? Asked Commander Relox. Then we learn what works and what doesn't, while Groups Delta through Kappa implement completely different approaches based on real-time battlefield analysis. Chen's smile was sharp as a blade. The beauty of asymmetric warfare is that you don't need every attack to succeed. You just need to succeed faster than your enemy can adapt. The modified coalition fleet departed for the Kelleran system 6 hours later, traveling in dispersed formations that confused enemy tracking while allowing rapid tactical coordination. Human modifications to coalition sensors provided real-time intelligence sharing across all fleet elements, creating a collective awareness that no individual ship could achieve alone. As they approached the outer edge of the Kelleran system, long-range sensors detected the familiar signatures of Devourer bioships moving toward the inhabited worlds. But instead of the usual 3 or 4 massive vessels, this invasion force numbered over a dozen, suggesting the Devourers had escalated their tactics in response to recent coalition resistance. Multiple bioship contacts, reported sensor operator Thekmar, his auxiliary arms dancing across control surfaces with nervous energy. Configuration suggests this is a major consumption event, possibly intended to establish a permanent presence in this sector. Perfect, Chen said with satisfaction. Larger target groups provide better opportunities for comprehensive tactical analysis. Admiral Torvin looked like he wanted to object, but the time for debate had passed. The Devourer bioships were already beginning their approach to Kelleran Prime, and every minute of delay gave them additional time to establish defensive positions. All groups initiate Hunter Protocol, Chen commanded, her voice carrying across communication channels to 17 different attack formations. Remember, we're not trying to drive them off. We're trying to kill them all. The attack began with surgical precision that caught the Devourer bioships completely unprepared. Group Alpha's kinetic impactors struck their propulsion systems at the exact moment their navigation orbits were reconfiguring for orbital approach. Group Beta's electromagnetic pulses disrupted their organic technology during the vulnerable transition between interstellar and planetary operational modes. Group Gamma's thermal weapons began cauterizing bioship repair systems before they could respond to initial damage. But the real surprise came from Groups Delta through Kappa, which implemented attack patterns that no civilization had ever attempted against Devourer forces. Group Delta used modified mining equipment to bore directly into bioship hulls, depositing explosive charges in their internal organs before withdrawing to safe distances. Group Echo deployed swarms of automated drones programmed to attach themselves to bioship sensory organs and transmit false information about coalition fleet positions. Group Foxtrot used chemical weapons specifically designed to target the organic components of Devourer technology. The battle was over in less than 3 hours. When the tactical assessment was complete, Admiral Torvin stared at the results with the expression of someone whose fundamental understanding of reality had just been shattered. 12 Devourer bioships destroyed, with no coalition losses and minimal damage to most fleet elements. How? He asked quietly. Because we didn't fight them the way they expected to be fought, Chen explained, already studying tactical data for the next engagement. Every previous battle they've experienced followed predictable patterns. Fleet approaches, ships exchange fire at maximum range, coalition forces attempt to disable rather than destroy, Devourers adapt and counterattack. They had evolved specifically to counter that approach. She highlighted specific tactical moments where human strategies had proven decisive. We attacked during their most vulnerable operational phase, used weapons they had never encountered before, and coordinated our assault across multiple engagement vectors simultaneously. Most importantly, we fought to kill rather than to disable. But how do we know this will work against the next group? Commander Rylox asked. If they're truly a hive mind, won't they share this tactical information with other Devourer forces? Chen's smile was coldly satisfied. That's exactly what we're counting on. Now they know that coalition forces are no longer following predictable patterns. They know their previous tactical adaptations are worthless. They know their next encounter with coalition forces will be fundamentally different from anything they've experienced before. She paused, studying the faces of the coalition officers around her. Most importantly, they know they're not just facing resistance anymore. They're facing predators. The implications of that statement rippled through the command center like shockwaves. For the first time since the Devourer crisis began, Coalition forces had not just survived an encounter with the enemy, they had dominated it so completely that the psychological dynamics of the entire conflict had shifted. What happens next? Ambassador Kethvar asked. Next, we follow them home. Chen said simply. We track their retreat vectors, analyze their communication patterns, and identify their staging areas. Then we hunt down every last nest, spawning ground, and support facility they've established in Coalition space. She turned to face Admiral Torvin directly. Admiral, your people have been fighting defensively for 3 years, responding to threats as they emerge, while the Devourers choose the time and place of every engagement. That ends now. From this point forward, we dictate the terms of this war. Colonel Webb activated additional displays showing projected Devourer response patterns based on their known behavioral characteristics. The analysis was simultaneously fascinating and terrifying in its completeness. Intelligence suggests they'll attempt to consolidate their remaining forces for a major counterattack within the next 6 weeks, he reported. Standard coalition doctrine would call for defensive preparations and hardened positions. Instead, we're going to hunt them down individually while they're trying to coordinate, Colonel Vasquez added. Hit them when they're isolated, vulnerable, and attempting to communicate with each other. The tactical projections showed a campaign unlike anything in coalition military history. Instead of grand fleet actions and ceremonial battles, human doctrine called for relentless pursuit of individual enemy groups, harassment of their communication networks, and systematic destruction of their support infrastructure. This will take months, Admiral Torvin observed. Yes, Chen agreed. But when we're finished, there won't be any Devourers left to threaten coalition space. Ever. She gestured toward the tactical displays showing the destroyed bioships floating lifeless in Kelleran space. Today was just the beginning. We showed them that their old assumptions about coalition capabilities were wrong. We showed them that their tactical adaptations were worthless. Most importantly, we showed them that they're no longer fighting soldiers bound by rules of engagement. The general's expression was that of a predator that had tasted blood and found it satisfying. They wanted to consume coalition worlds? Fine. Now they get to discover what it feels like when something decides to consume them instead. 3 months into the human campaign, the nature of the war had changed so fundamentally that coalition officers struggled to recognize their own military. What had once been a desperate defensive action against an overwhelming enemy had become something that resembled extermination more than traditional warfare. Captain Mordek of the newly redesigned hunter-killer, Relentless Pursuit, studied the tactical displays as his ship stalked a wounded Devourer bioship through the outer asteroid belt of the vegan system. The organic vessel was leaking some kind of biological fluid that left a trail visible to enhanced coalition sensors, and human tactical doctrine called for following such targets until they led to larger concentrations of enemy forces. Target appears to be attempting communication with unknown recipients, reported his sensor officer, a young crystalline whose species processed electromagnetic data in ways that complemented human electronic warfare systems. Signal strength suggests it's reaching someone beyond this star system. Good, Mordek replied, his attitude toward wounded enemies having changed dramatically since working with human tactical advisors. Let it talk. We want its friends to know what's coming. The transformation in his own thinking still surprised him. 6 months ago, Captain Mordek would have offered medical assistance to a damaged enemy vessel. Now, he was using its distress as bait to draw more targets into killing range. The humans called it following the blood trail, and it had proven devastatingly effective against Devourer forces that had never experienced pursuit by genuinely hostile predators. His ship was no longer recognizable as the elegant cruiser it had once been. Human modifications had stripped away everything not essential to hunting and killing, replacing ceremonial features with additional weapons, enhanced sensors, and what the humans termed persistent systems, designed to allow indefinite pursuit of fleeing enemies. The bridge itself reflected this new reality, where once coalition officers had worked in comfortable, spacious stations designed for extended diplomatic missions. Now they operated from cramped but efficient control positions optimized for rapid tactical response. Every surface displayed real-time intelligence data shared across the entire human coalition hunter network. Captain, called his communications officer, we're receiving tactical updates from Hunter Groups 7 and 12. They've successfully eliminated 3 bioship clusters in the Rigel sector and are requesting permission to pursue retreating elements into unknown space. Granted, Mordek replied without hesitation. The old coalition would never have authorized military operations beyond established borders. The new reality was that borders meant nothing if the enemy was allowed to regroup beyond them. The wounded bioship they were following suddenly altered course, diving deeper into the asteroid field in what appeared to be an attempt to break line-of-sight contact. But human modifications to Coalition sensors made such evasion attempts futile. The target's biological emissions were as visible as searchlight beams to their enhanced detection systems. "Sir, the target's course change suggests it's heading towards something specific," observed Lieutenant Kesara, her tentacles flickering with excitement. "Pattern analysis indicates a predetermined destination rather than random evasion." "Excellent," Mordek said with satisfaction. "Signal Hunter Groups 4 and 6 to position themselves along likely egress routes. Whatever this thing is leading us to, we want to make sure nothing escapes when we find it." The hunt continued for another 6 hours, during which time the wounded bioship led them deeper into unexplored space than any Coalition vessel had traveled in decades. But instead of the empty void they expected, their sensors began detecting artificial structures hidden among the larger asteroids. "Captain," the sensor officer reported with barely controlled excitement, "we found a Devourer's staging area. Multiple bioships, what appear to be construction facilities, and something else, something big." The tactical display populated with contact symbols representing the largest concentration of Devourer forces yet discovered. Over 30 bioships of various sizes, along with organic structures that seemed to be growing directly from asteroid surfaces. And at the center of it all, something massive enough to have its own gravitational field. "Signal the fleet," Mordek ordered. "We've found their nest." The response to his transmission was immediate and overwhelming. Within hours, over 200 Coalition vessels modified to human hunting specifications began converging on the asteroid field. But instead of the traditional approach of surrounding the enemy and demanding surrender, human tactical doctrine called for something far more direct. General Chen arrived aboard the command ship Terra's Wrath, a vessel so heavily modified that it barely resembled its original Coalition design. Its hull bristled with weapons that had never been intended for ship-to-ship combat, and its sensor arrays could track individual life forms on planets light years away. "Analysis of the central structure suggests it's some kind of hive nexus," reported Colonel Webb as they studied the tactical data. "Biological computing center, possibly coordinating Devour operations across multiple star systems." "Perfect," Chen said with the satisfaction of a hunter who had finally cornered dangerous prey. "If we destroy it, we cut off their ability to coordinate tactical adaptations." "The sheer size of the enemy force presents significant challenges," Admiral Torvin observed. He had adapted to human tactical methods with surprising speed, though his discomfort with their brutality remained obvious. "Even with our enhanced capabilities, we're outnumbered almost 3-1. Numbers are only relevant if both sides are fighting the same kind of war," Chen replied, activating detailed attack plans that had been prepared for exactly this scenario. "They're expecting a traditional fleet engagement. We're going to give them something they've never imagined." The assault began with the release of thousands of automated hunter-killer drones, each one programmed to seek out and destroy specific types of Devourer biotechnology. The drones were too small for bioship weapons to target effectively, but carried enough explosive force to cripple organic systems from within. While Devourer forces focused on the drone swarms, Coalition hunter groups implemented what humans called cascade destruction protocols. Instead of engaging bioships directly, they targeted the asteroid-based support structures, using the resulting debris as kinetic weapons against larger targets. The battle was unlike anything in recorded galactic history. Traditional space combat involved orderly exchanges of fire between opposing forces, with clear engagement ranges and predictable tactical progressions. This engagement resembled a feeding frenzy more than a military operation, with Coalition forces attacking from every conceivable vector, while Devour bioships struggled to adapt to threats they had never been designed to counter. Captain Mordek found himself piloting his ship through a maze of organic debris and explosive decompression events, as Devourer structures suffered catastrophic failures. The humans had calculated exactly which support systems to target to create maximum cascade damage, and their predictions were proving devastatingly accurate. "The central nexus is attempting to evacuate," reported his sensor officer. "Multiple bioships are forming protective formations around it." "Signal Hunter Group Alpha," Mardek ordered. "Time to test those deep penetration weapons." The weapons Colonel Vasquez's teams had developed were specifically designed to neutralize heavily defended targets. Instead of traditional energy beams or kinetic projectiles, they deployed self-replicating nanoscale disruptors that could burrow through organic armor and systematically dismantle biological systems from within. The effect on the Devourer Nexus was immediate and horrifying. The massive structure began convulsing as internal systems failed in cascading waves, its organic components literally dissolving as the nanoscale weapons replicated and spread throughout its entire mass. "My God," whispered Admiral Torvin, watching the destruction with a mixture of awe and revulsion. "You're not just killing them, you're unmaking them." "That's the point," Chen replied without taking her eyes off the tactical display. "We want every surviving Devourer to understand that resistance is futile, that their technology, their tactics, their very biology is inferior to human hunting methods." The battle continued for 18 hours, but the outcome was never in doubt once the central nexus began failing. Devourer bioships lost coordination, their hive mind communications disrupted by the destruction of their primary processing center. Coalition hunter groups systematically tracked down and eliminated every fleeing vessel, following them through hyperspace if necessary, to ensure no survivors escaped. When the tactical assessment was complete, the results were staggering. 37 Devourer bioships destroyed, along with their primary coordination center and all associated support infrastructure. 0 coalition losses, minimal damage to hunter groups. "How many do you estimate remain in coalition space?" Ambassador Kethvar asked during the post-battle briefing. Colonel Webb consulted his analysis systems with the thoroughness that characterized human intelligence operations. Based on communication intercepts and movement patterns, approximately 60 bioships distributed across 15 star systems all appear to be attempting to consolidate for a final stand somewhere in the Outer Rim territories. "Let them," Chen said with cold satisfaction. "Consolidation makes our job easier. Instead of hunting them individually across hundreds of light years, they're gathering themselves into convenient target groups." She activated projections showing predicted Devourer movement patterns based on their behavioral analysis. The accuracy of human intelligence had improved dramatically as they gathered more data about enemy psychology and decision-making processes. "Intelligence suggests they're attempting to establish a defensive position in the Void Nebula," Colonel Vasquez reported. "Dense gas clouds would interfere with traditional coalition sensors and provide cover for bioship operations. Unfortunately for them, we don't use traditional coalition sensors anymore," Chen pointed out. "Human modifications allow us to track biological signatures through electromagnetic interference that would blind older systems." The general stood, studying the faces of coalition officers who had experienced a transformation as dramatic as their ships and tactics. "Gentlemen, we're approaching the final phase of this campaign. The Devourers are no longer spreading throughout coalition space, consuming worlds and adapting to our responses. They're running, gathering together, for a last stand in territory they think will protect them." She gestured toward the tactical displays showing the vast nebula where enemy forces were consolidating. "They've never faced predators before. They don't understand that when you're being hunted by something more dangerous than yourself, gathering in one place doesn't make you safer. It makes you easier to kill." Admiral Torvin raised a concern that had been troubling many coalition officers. "General, what happens after we destroy the remaining Devourer forces? Will human tactical methods become permanent additions to coalition military doctrine?" Chen considered the question carefully before responding. "Admiral, your species developed rules of engagement based on the assumption that you would be fighting other civilized species with similar moral frameworks. Those rules work perfectly well against enemies who share your values about proportional response and limited warfare." She paused, studying the tactical displays showing the devastation they had inflicted on Devourer forces. "But when you encounter something that views your entire civilization as food, when you face an enemy that cannot be reasoned with, negotiated with, or deterred by anything except overwhelming force, then civilized rules become a luxury you cannot afford." "So these methods are permanent?" Commander Rilox asked. "These specific methods are designed for a specific type of threat," Chen clarified. "But the underlying principle is permanent. The galaxy is not a safe place filled only with reasonable neighbors who share your commitment to civilized behavior. When you encounter something that threatens your existence, you deal with it decisively." She gestured toward the assembled coalition officers, many of whom had been transformed by months of hunting alongside human tactical teams. "Your people have learned how to hunt, how to track enemies to their sources, how to fight without restraint when restraint would mean extinction. Those skills don't disappear when this particular threat is eliminated." The implications of her words settled over the briefing chamber like a physical weight. The coalition had called for soldiers and received hunters instead. But the transformation was not limited to their military capabilities. It had changed their fundamental understanding of survival in a dangerous universe. "The final hunt begins tomorrow," Chen announced. "We follow them into the Void Nebula, and we finish this permanently." When we emerge, there will be no Devourer threat remaining anywhere in Coalition space. Her expression carried the cold certainty of an apex predator confident in its abilities. They came to our space uninvited. They consumed our worlds without provocation. They threaten the existence of every civilized species in the galaxy. Now they get to discover what happens when you pick a fight with something that has spent its entire evolutionary history learning how to kill. The Void Nebula stretched across 3 light-years of space like a wound in reality itself, its dense clouds of ionized gas and electromagnetic interference creating conditions that had challenged navigators for millennia. It was the perfect hiding place for something that wanted to disappear from civilized space, which was exactly why General Chen suspected it would become the Devourer's final grave. Admiral Torvin stood on the bridge of the Terror's Wrath, watching the massive Coalition hunter fleet prepare for entry into the nebula. What had once been elegant ships designed for exploration and diplomacy now resembled mechanical predators, their hulls bristling with weapons that had never been intended for traditional warfare. Final tactical assessment indicates 63 Devourer bioships have taken refuge within the nebula, reported Colonel Webb, his displays showing intelligence gathered from deep reconnaissance probes that had been secretly mapping the interior for weeks.
They've positioned themselves around what appears to be a naturally occurring gravitational anchor point, possibly attempting to establish a permanent base of operations.
Or preparing for a final stand, Chen observed, studying the tactical data with the intensity of a predator analyzing prey.
Either way, they've made our job significantly easier by concentrating their remaining forces. Captain Mordak, now serving as tactical coordinator for the Crystalline Hunter groups, raised a concern that had been troubling many Coalition officers. General, our enhanced sensors are functioning normally, but the electromagnetic interference will limit real-time communication between hunter groups. Traditional Coalition tactics rely heavily on coordinated fleet movements, which is why we're not using traditional Coalition tactics, Chen replied with the patient tone she used when explaining fundamental concepts. Human hunting doctrine assumes communication failures, sensor limitations, and chaotic battlefield conditions. Each hunter group has independent operational authority and predetermined objectives. She activated detailed tactical projections that showed how the assault would unfold without centralized coordination. Group Alpha penetrates the nebula from the galactic north vector and establishes sensor pickets along the primary gravitational field lines. Group Beta approaches from the south and begins systematic sweep operations to identify all bioship positions. Groups Gamma through Kappa implement harassment protocols designed to drive Devourer forces toward predetermined kill zones. The complexity of the operation was staggering. Instead of the straightforward fleet actions preferred by Coalition military tradition, human tactical doctrine called for simultaneous implementation of dozens of independent operations, each designed to achieve specific objectives while contributing to overall strategic goals. "What about escape routes?" asked Commander Rylox, his forearms gesturing toward areas of the nebula that extended beyond their operational perimeter. Previous engagements have shown that wounded Devourer vessels often attempt to flee rather than fight to destruction. Colonel Vasquez smiled with predatory satisfaction as she highlighted additional tactical elements. Groups Lima through Zulu are already in position along every potential egress vector. Nothing enters or leaves the nebula without our knowledge. This isn't a battle, Commander. It's a comprehensive extermination operation. The assault began at precisely 0800 Coalition Standard Time with the deployment of advanced reconnaissance drones designed to function despite electromagnetic interference. These devices, modified with human technology that treated the nebula's chaotic energy patterns as camouflage rather than obstacles, began mapping Devourer positions with devastating accuracy. Admiral Torvin watched the tactical displays populate with contact symbols representing the largest concentration of enemy forces they had encountered since the war began. But instead of the anxiety such numbers would once have provoked, he found himself calculating optimal target priorities and weapons allocation patterns. Months of hunting alongside human tactical teams had fundamentally changed his approach to warfare. Interesting, Chen observed as the reconnaissance data revealed the Devourer defensive arrangements. They'd positioned their bioships in traditional formation patterns, with larger vessels protecting smaller ones and overlapping fields of fire covering approach vectors. That's actually quite intelligent, Admiral Torvin noted. It suggests they've learned from our previous engagements and adapted their tactics accordingly. Yes, Chen agreed with the satisfied expression of a hunter whose prey had become more interesting. Unfortunately for them, they've adapted to counter traditional fleet engagement tactics. We're not implementing traditional fleet engagement tactics. The first phase of the assault came without warning as Group Alpha's sensor pickets detected optimal attack conditions and automatically signaled the beginning of Hunter Protocol 7. This was something entirely new, developed specifically for operations within electromagnetic interference zones, where real-time coordination was impossible. Instead of approaching the Devourer defensive positions directly, coalition hunter groups began what humans called environmental warfare. They used the nebula's own chaotic energy patterns as weapons, employing gravitational manipulation devices to create localized instabilities that would tear apart anything caught within their effects. Captain Mordek piloted his ship through gas clouds that glowed with the aftermath of gravitational distortions, watching as Devourer bioships struggled to maintain formation while their environment became increasingly hostile. The humans had calculated precisely which gravitational anchor points to destabilize to create maximum chaos within enemy defensive arrangements. Target Group 7 is attempting to reposition, reported his sensor officer, tracking bioship movements through electromagnetic static that would have blinded traditional coalition sensors. They appear to be seeking more stable gravitational conditions. Signal Hunter Group Delta. Mordek ordered. Time to demonstrate why seeking stability in an unstable environment is a fatal mistake. Hunter Group Delta had been positioned exactly where gravitational calculations predicted fleeing bioships would attempt to establish new defensive positions. As Devourer vessels moved toward what they thought was safer territory, they instead found themselves surrounded by coalition hunter-killers equipped with weapons designed to exploit gravitational instabilities. The engagement was brief and devastating. Bioships that had survived dozens of previous battles were torn apart by gravitational shear forces they had never been designed to counter. Their organic technology, evolved for stable space conditions, proved catastrophically vulnerable to environmental warfare techniques. Phase 2 initiating, reported Colonel Webb as tactical conditions reached predetermined parameters. All hunter groups are implementing close-range harassment protocols. What followed was unlike any battle in coalition military history. Instead of orderly exchanges of fire between opposing fleets, coalition hunter groups began systematically stalking individual bioships through the chaotic environment of the nebula, using the electromagnetic interference as camouflage while their enhanced sensors maintained perfect tracking capability. The psychological effect on Devourer forces was immediate and profound. For the first time in their species' history, they found themselves being hunted by predators more dangerous than themselves. Their hive mind coordination, dependent on biological communication networks, began failing as coalition hunter groups used precisely targeted electromagnetic pulses to disrupt their ability to share tactical information. They're beginning to panic, observed Admiral Torvin, watching as bioship formations broke apart into individual vessels attempting desperate escape maneuvers. I've never seen Devourer forces exhibit such chaotic behavior patterns. That's because they've never been systematically hunted before, Chen explained, studying real-time intelligence updates from dozens of hunter groups. Their entire evolutionary strategy was based on being the apex predator in any given environment. When that assumption fails, their tactical doctrine collapses. The hunt continued for hours, with coalition forces systematically tracking down and eliminating bioships that had scattered throughout the nebula in increasingly desperate attempts to escape. Human modifications to coalition sensors made such evasion attempts futile, while environmental warfare techniques ensured that fleeing enemies found no safe havens within the chaotic gas clouds. Captain Mordek found himself pursuing a damaged bioship through gravitational anomalies that would have destroyed his vessel if not for human-designed stabilization systems. The organic ship was leaking biological fluids that left a trail visible to his enhanced sensors, and its movement patterns suggested critical damage to propulsion systems. Target is attempting to reach the central gravitational anchor, his sensor officer reported. Pattern analysis suggests it's seeking to join with other surviving vessels for mutual defense. Negative, Mordek replied, his tactical thinking now thoroughly adapted to human hunting doctrine. Signal hunter groups Foxtrot and Golf to intercept. We want to eliminate it before it can communicate our position to other survivors. The engagement was over in minutes. The damaged bioship never reached the gravitational anchor point, its organic hull breached by kinetic penetrators that had been specifically designed to exploit the structural weaknesses of Devourer technology. Across the nebula, similar hunts were reaching their conclusions as coalition forces systematically eliminated the last remnants of the invasion force that had once threatened the existence of galactic civilization. Final tactical assessment reported Colonel Vasquez as the last confirmed bioship contact disappeared from their tracking systems. 63 Devourer vessels eliminated. 0 coalition losses. No confirmed escape vectors activated. The command center fell silent as the implications of that report settled over the assembled officers. For the first time in over 3 years, there were no confirmed Devourer forces remaining in coalition space.
Is it over?
Ambassador Kefvar asked quietly.
Chen studied the tactical displays showing the aftermath of their systematic extermination campaign. The nebula was filled with the debris of destroyed bioships, their organic technology already beginning to decompose in the chaotic electromagnetic environment. The immediate threat is over, she confirmed. But this was just one invasion force from whatever lies beyond the galactic rim. If we want to ensure this never happens again, we need to take the fight to them. Her words carried implications that made several coalition officers visibly uncomfortable. Admiral Torvin was the first to voice their concerns. General, you're suggesting aggressive action beyond coalition space, against an enemy we know almost nothing about. That goes far beyond defensive warfare. Admiral, 3 years ago, the Devourers came from beyond the galactic rim and began systematically consuming coalition worlds. They showed no interest in communication, negotiation, or anything other than complete consumption of organic life. They were an existential threat that could only be stopped by their complete elimination. Chen gestured toward the tactical displays showing the destroyed invasion force. Now we've eliminated their presence in coalition space, but we haven't eliminated the source of the threat. Somewhere beyond the rim, there are more of them. Possibly many more. Do we wait for them to mount another invasion, or do we ensure they never get the chance? The question hung in the air like a weapon waiting to be fired. Coalition military tradition favored defensive strategies and proportional responses to threats. But coalition military tradition had proven inadequate against an enemy that viewed their entire civilization as food. What are you proposing? Kefvar asked, though his expression suggested he already suspected the answer. I'm proposing that we follow them home, Chen said with the cold certainty of an apex predator that had tasted blood and found it satisfying. We track their invasion routes back to their point of origin. We identify their breeding grounds, their staging areas, their resource bases. And then we eliminate them so completely that the threat of another Devourer invasion becomes impossible. She activated projections showing long-range sensor data that human intelligence teams had been analyzing for months. We've identified their probable invasion routes and established preliminary tracking data for their points of origin. But more importantly, we've learned how to fight them effectively. How to hunt them, how to kill them. The general paused, studying the faces of coalition officers who had been transformed by months of hunting alongside human tactical teams. The question is whether the coalition is prepared to finish this permanently, or whether you prefer to wait for the next invasion and hope it's smaller than this one. Admiral Torvin found himself considering possibilities that would have horrified him a year ago. The transformation in his own thinking was as dramatic as the modifications to coalition military hardware. If we pursue them beyond the galactic rim, we'll be operating in completely unknown territory with no possibility of reinforcement or resupply. The risks are enormous. Loth.
Chen agreed.
But the risks of allowing them to regroup and mount another invasion are even greater. We have the tactical advantage now. We understand how to fight them effectively. We have the tools and the knowledge to eliminate them permanently. Her expression carried the cold calculation of someone who had spent months studying the most efficient ways to kill an entire species. The galaxy called for soldiers when this crisis began. We gave you hunters instead. Now the question is whether you're prepared to let those hunters finish the job. 6 months after the Battle of the Void Nebula, the combined human coalition expedition fleet crossed the galactic rim into space that no civilized species had ever explored. What they found there would haunt the dreams of xenobiologists for generations to come. The Devourer homeworld was not a planet in any conventional sense. It was a massive organic construct built around the gravitational core of a dead star system, its surface writhing with biological activity that pulsed in rhythm with some incomprehensible alien heartbeat. Sensor readings indicated a structure larger than most gas giants, entirely composed of living tissue that showed signs of technological sophistication beyond anything the Coalition had previously encountered. Admiral Torvin stood on the bridge of the Terror's Wrath, staring at the tactical displays with the expression of someone confronting a nightmare made manifest. Around the organic homeworld, space teemed with bioships in numbers that made their previous encounters seem insignificant by comparison. Preliminary count indicates over 8,000 individual bioship signatures, reported Captain Mordek, his voice steady despite the magnitude of what they were observing. Configuration suggests this is their primary breeding and construction facility. Not anymore, General Chen said, with the cold satisfaction of a hunter who had finally cornered the source of a dangerous infestation. Today, it becomes their graveyard. The transformation in coalition thinking was perhaps most evident in Admiral Torvin's immediate response. Instead of expressing concern about the overwhelming enemy numbers, he began calculating optimal target priorities and weapons allocation patterns. General, the sheer size of the enemy force presents unprecedented challenges. Even with our enhanced capabilities and human tactical modifications, we're outnumbered approximately 50 to 1. Numbers are only relevant if both sides are fighting the same kind of war, Chen replied, activating attack plans that had been in development since they first detected the Devourer homeworld. They're expecting a traditional fleet engagement. We're going to give them something that makes our previous operations look restrained by comparison. Colonel Webb manipulated the tactical displays to show the detailed structure of the organic homeworld, highlighting specific target areas that human analysis had identified as critical to the entire system's survival. Intelligence analysis indicates the homeworld functions as a single massive organism with centralized biological control systems. If we can identify and eliminate the primary neural clusters, the entire structure should undergo catastrophic system failure. You want to perform surgery on a planet? Admiral Torvin asked, his tone mixing awe with revulsion. We want to perform an execution, Colonel Vasquez corrected. This isn't a planet. It's a cancer that's been growing in space for millions of years, spawning invasions that have probably consumed hundreds of civilizations. Today we cure the galaxy of its existence. The assault began with the deployment of deep penetration probes designed to map the homeworld's internal structure while avoiding detection by its immune responses. These devices, modified with technology that mimicked Devourer biological signatures, burrowed through layers of organic tissue to identify the neural networks that controlled the entire system. What they discovered was both fascinating and horrifying. The homeworld was not just a breeding ground for bioships, it was a vast biological computer that stored the collective memory and knowledge of every species the Devourers had ever consumed. The neural networks contained detailed information about thousands of extinct civilizations, their technologies, their weaknesses, and their final moments before consumption. We're looking at the accumulated knowledge of most of this galaxy's evolutionary history, reported Dr. Kreshtai, the expedition's chief xenobiologist. The amount of information stored here is staggering. This single organism contains more scientific and cultural data than our entire coalition database. Had, Chen corrected grimly. Past tense. Because in approximately 6 hours, none of it will exist anymore. The moral implications of destroying such a repository of knowledge were staggering, and several coalition officers raised concerns about the permanent loss of irreplaceable information. General, Ambassador Kethvar said carefully, surely there must be some way to preserve the cultural and scientific knowledge stored in these neural networks. We're talking about the accumulated wisdom of potentially millions of civilizations. Knowledge that was stolen from species that were murdered to obtain it, Chen replied without hesitation. Knowledge that's being used to make future invasions more effective. Knowledge that exists only because entire civilizations were consumed to feed this thing. She gestured toward the tactical displays showing the massive organic structure. Ambassador, if someone murdered your family to steal their memories, would you want those memories preserved in the mind of their killer? Or would you want the killer eliminated regardless of what knowledge died with them? The question silenced objections before they could be raised. The expedition had not come to preserve Devourer achievements. They had come to ensure that the threat they represented could never emerge again. The systematic destruction of the homeworld began with surgical strikes against the primary neural clusters. Human-designed weapons delivered nanoscale destructors directly into the organism's central nervous system, causing cascading failures that rippled through the entire biological network. The effect was immediate and profound. Bioships throughout the system began showing signs of coordination failure as their hive mind connections to the homeworld started breaking down. For the first time in their species' history, individual Devourer vessels found themselves operating without the collective intelligence that had guided their every action. Neural disruption is proceeding ahead of schedule, reported Colonel Webb, monitoring the homeworld's biological responses to their attack. Primary control systems are failing faster than projected. The organism appears to have no defense mechanisms against internal system corruption. Because they evolved as apex predators, Chen explained, watching with satisfaction as the massive structure began showing signs of distress. They never encountered anything dangerous enough to require defensive evolution. Their entire biology is optimized for consumption, not survival against superior threats. The battle for the Devourer homeworld was unlike anything in galactic military history. Instead of fleet actions between opposing forces, coalition hunter groups systematically eliminated bioships that had lost their coordination and guidance systems. The creatures that had once seemed so formidable now behaved like confused animals, their tactical responses reduced to basic instinctual patterns. Captain Mordek found himself pursuing bioships through debris fields created by the homeworld's disintegrating surface layers. The organic ships moved with desperate, uncoordinated urgency, their hive mind connections severed by the progressive destruction of the neural networks that had bound them together. Target vessels appear to be attempting some kind of reproductive protocol, his sensor officer reported. They're releasing organic material that shows signs of rapid cellular division. Emergency spawning, Chen identified over the communication channel. They're trying to produce enough offspring to overwhelm our hunter groups through sheer numbers. The tactical response was immediate and devastating. Human-designed biological warfare agents, specifically engineered to target devourer reproductive systems, were deployed throughout the spawning fields. The result was the systematic sterilization of millions of potential bioships before they could develop beyond the larval stage. Population elimination proceeding according to projections, reported Colonel Vasquez with clinical efficiency. Current estimates suggest total species extinction within 48 hours. Admiral Torvin watched the systematic destruction with feelings he couldn't entirely identify. The logical part of his mind recognized the necessity of eliminating an existential threat to galactic civilization. But another part of him struggled with the magnitude of what they were accomplishing. "We're exterminating an entire species," he said quietly to Ambassador Kethvar. "Not defeating them, not driving them away, completely eliminating them from existence. A species that was systematically exterminating every other form of life it encountered," Kethvar replied, his own moral framework having undergone dramatic changes during months of hunting alongside human tactical teams. "Admiral, sometimes survival requires choices that would be unthinkable under normal circumstances." The destruction of the homeworld accelerated as its biological control systems continued failing. Massive sections of the organic surface began decomposing into component elements, while internal structures collapsed as the neural networks that maintained them ceased to function. "Homeworld structural integrity failing across all sectors," reported Captain Mordek. "The organism is experiencing total system shutdown. Estimated time to complete biological failure is 6 hours, 14 minutes. "Perfect," Chen said with the satisfaction of a hunter whose prey could no longer escape. "Signal all hunter groups to begin final sweep operations. I want every bioship in this system eliminated before the homeworld finishes dying." The final phase of the extermination campaign was methodical and thorough. Coalition hunter groups, now operating with the efficiency of apex predators, systematically tracked down and eliminated every remaining bioship in the system. No escape attempts succeeded. No surrender offers were made or accepted. The campaign proceeded exactly as human doctrine dictated, completely, efficiently, and permanently. When the tactical assessment was complete 18 hours later, the results were absolute. The Devourer homeworld had collapsed into a debris field of decomposing organic matter. 8,372 bioships had been destroyed. No escape vectors had been activated. No communication signals had been detected from other Devourer territories. "Species extinction confirmed," reported Colonel Webb, with the matter-of-fact tone of someone completing a routine status report. "Biological analysis indicates no viable reproductive material survived the sterilization protocols. The Devourer threat has been permanently eliminated." The silence that followed was profound. For the first time in galactic history, an entire species had been deliberately and systematically exterminated by coalition forces. The moral implications were staggering, but so was the alternative they had prevented. "What happens now?" Ambassador Kethvar asked quietly. General Chen studied the tactical displays showing the debris field that had once been an existential threat to galactic civilization. Her expression carried the satisfaction of someone who had completed a necessary but distasteful task. "Now we go home," she said simply. "The galaxy is safe from this particular threat. The Coalition can return to peaceful exploration, diplomatic relations, and civilized commerce without worrying about invasion by something that views sentient life as food." She paused, studying the faces of Coalition officers who had participated in the systematic extermination of an entire species. But the galaxy has also learned something important. It's learned that when civilized species face extinction, they can become something more dangerous than their enemies ever imagined. The Coalition called for soldiers when this crisis began. You got hunters instead. And those hunters have demonstrated that survival sometimes requires choices that would horrify us under normal circumstances. Admiral Torvin found himself thinking about the transformation in his own moral framework, the gradual acceptance of tactical brutality that would have appalled him a year ago. "Will we revert to our previous military doctrines now that this threat is eliminated?" "That's up to the Coalition," Chen replied. "But you've learned how to hunt, how to track enemies to their sources, how to fight without restraint when restraint would mean extinction. Those capabilities don't disappear just because this particular threat has been eliminated. She gestured toward the debris field that marked the end of the devourer species. The galaxy is not a safe place filled only with reasonable neighbors who share your commitment to civilized behavior. We've demonstrated what happens when something threatens the existence of coalition civilization. The question is whether you choose to remember that lesson or pretend it was never necessary. The expedition fleet began its journey home 3 days later, leaving behind a star system that had been completely sterilized of the most dangerous threat galactic civilization had ever encountered. But they carried with them knowledge that would forever change how the Coalition viewed survival in a dangerous universe. The galaxy had called for soldiers when the crisis began. Humanity had sent hunters instead. And when the final tally was complete, those hunters had accomplished something that no civilized species had ever attempted: the complete and permanent elimination of an existential threat. The devourers were extinct. The galaxy was safe. And somewhere in the void between stars, other potential threats had learned a fundamental truth about the species that called themselves human and the civilizations they chose to protect. When humanity hunts, it hunts to extinction, and it spares no one.